All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the Stevensville Town Council meeting. Today is Thursday, June 10th, 2021. Ms. Bertha, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Devlin? Here. Councilmember Ludington?
Here.
Councilmember Sherman? Here. Councilmember Vick?
Here.
And Mayor Dewey.
Here. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and open the floor for public comment from citizens on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Mayor, before this, I'd like to make a motion to suspend council rules to bring up an issue of urgent matter to the council.
Okay. Is there a second to suspend council rules? Deviate from the agenda.
Second.
Okay.
In light of recent events, or when I say recent events, I mean the events that I made a press release on earlier today, I believe that at the time that those issues were cut and dry. I found out later today from Mr. Underwood that his services have been requested as no longer being needed with the town of Stevensville, and discovered that this issue that had come up was something that occurred back in December. Not in the March-April timeline as I was led to believe. And in light of this, I am going to make a motion to try Mayor Dewey for misuse of public funds.
Is there a second? Okay, motion dies for lack of a second.
By making this particular motion, is that without an investigation?
No, I have asked Mr. Owens to perform a full investigation into the claim to find out exactly what it was that happened, so that we can, so it's a trial. Let me restate that. It is making a motion dependent on, or making a motion for trial pending the results of the investigation.
Well, I agree that there needs to be an investigation into the issue. I feel like a trial is kind of jumping the gun here. It's just my opinion. I do feel there needs to be an investigation into the situation and what happened, and everything needs to be brought to light.
Correct.
I'll just offer, rather than going down the road of an investigation, would it just be helpful for council to see the accounting of what happened? I mean, is that what you're looking for? Rather than hiring a third party to come in and do interviews and use funds to look at a situation that the city attorney has said nothing wrong happened, nothing illegal's happened. He issued you all a letter today. Did you all receive that?
Mm-hmm.
Did you
I
get
did
it?
not.
Okay. I'll read it for the record. That way it's out in the open. This is from the city attorney, Scott Owens, regarding the statement of legal inquiry and identification. It says, Mayor and council members, today, June 10th, 2021, I was notified of the statement that was released regarding the claim that was submitted on behalf of the mayor's office. This statement is provided to clarify and correct the information that was disseminated. As I understand, a claim was submitted for identification of the costs incurred through litigation in the recall matter, Dewey versus Rotobaugh. This claim was processed out of cycle. Immediately, the town finance officer and the mayor reported this expenditure to my office and requested an opinion. The recent statement uses the term whistleblower to describe how this information came to my office. This is inaccurate. Whether this claim qualifies for identification is a matter of debate. Sparring the legal analysis on this issue, public policy and statutory law, Title II and Title IX, form the basis for this debate. Looking at other jurisdictions, it is apparent that there is no clear answer. In 2020, a recall election was spurred in Helena, where the city attorney's office provided a full defense for the officers subject to recall. Additionally, there is ongoing litigation regarding identification in Jefferson County that may provide further clarification on this issue in the future. At this point, it is my opinion that the mayor could submit this claim for identification. However, decision to identify would have to obtain council approval or become an issue of litigation. On or about April 19th, 2021, advice from my office was given to repay the money, resubmit the claim, and present the issue of identification to the council for determination. As part of my obligation, this information surrounding this issue was discussed with Council President Dempsey Vick. Shortly after delivering my opinion and consulting with the Council President, I was informed that the money had been repaid and that the mayor was no longer interested in seeking identification. Please let me know if you have any further questions. Sincerely, Scott Phillips, Town Attorney.
You were talked to about this in April.
Correct.
It's June.
Correct.
So why didn't you do something about it then?
Because at the time the way I was informed is that it was a cut and dry situation. And I was going to allow Mr. Dewey to present the issue himself since it involved him completely. Since he did not, that is why I chose to release the information now.
I guess I'm curious what's not cut and dry about it now.
After that letter that you just read from Mr. Owens was released, I received a phone call from Mr. Underwood letting me know that he had been let go as of 5 o'clock this afternoon. And then because he did have an agreement with the town where he would stay on until we received a new finance officer, I discovered that he had been let go.
Okay, you're getting into a personnel issue we're not going to discuss in this meeting.
I'm not done. And ended up discovering that during this whole time back in December, after the check was cut, that on a day that Mr. Underwood was off of work, that Mr. Dewey had instructed another employee of the town to code into the Black Mountain software that the money had been repaid, which I did ask and did verify again that the money has been repaid, but he instructed an employee that was not the finance officer to go into our Black Mountain accounting system and code in there that the money had been repaid, and apparently it was coded in incorrectly.
Do you have any factual basis for that statement?
I have this information from the former finance officer.
Okay. But you don't have it firsthand from the employee that you allege is involved.
I did not allege any employee. I just said that I was informed that an employee was told to do it.
But you didn't verify that actually happened.
I verified it by asking the person that should have the only access to the Black Mountain accounting software.
Okay, but you didn't ask me if I asked that employee to do it, and you didn't ask that employee if she was asked to do it.
I never verified the gender of the employee.
Well, her gender is irrelevant. But there's only two gentlemen that really work in the office, so we can narrow it down.
Okay, then, Mr. Mayor, did you instruct an employee to code into the system that you had repaid the money?
I turned in a claim to the individual who processes the claims for our organization. Laura enters all claims.
Okay,
I turned in a claim with my purchase order and my coding.
Okay.
The coding was appropriate. It was under legal services. There was no impropriety in the coding. She processed the claim. The claims were run. The claim approval sheet was run. It's my understanding that Mr. Underwood reviews the claims approval sheet prior to the meetings. In that case, it was an out-of-cycle claim because of the Christmas holiday. It's also my understanding Mr. Underwood reviews the checks prior to signing them. We co-sign checks. He signed the check, I signed the check in the same batch of claims, and checks were mailed.
okay,
Following that, we in January or February, realized we did not run the out-of-cycle claims back for ratification through council. And address the issue with the city attorney. Okay, that's when he first became involved, and then he refers to that in his letter. It took him some time to render what to do with it. And that's where we ended up back in April, is with we had two options according to Scott, was seek identification. Regardless, we had to back up. We missed a critical step. So we either sought identification or the money was put back where it belongs. No money transferred from the town's account into my bank account. To be clear about that. As soon as we were made aware of the issue and that it needed to be corrected, then I wrote a personal check back to the town and reimbursed the town for the costs of that lawsuit. And then did not seek identification. As far as the city attorney was concerned, there was nothing further to the issue. He did not feel that an audit finding would result because the money had been returned and we had memoed in the accounting system and through documentation exactly what had happened. There's an accounting of every step and justification at every step. In fact, there's a statement that states we acknowledge we didn't ratify the claims in December and that we discussed it as an administration and will prevent it from happening again. So we've put things into place and documented exactly what happened. So there was no attempt for a cover-up or any of those types of allegations. We paid a bill and later learned identification should have happened, so we backed up.
All right. As far as this moment goes, I'm not gonna say I'm completely satisfied, but I'm satisfied for a moment. For right now, I'm holding off on a trial, but I would like for Mr. Owens to be given permission to continue the directive or the direction I pointed him in, that I would like to see a full-on investigation, including interviews with all staff members involved in this. So we can discover exactly where the breakdown happened and we can prevent it from happening again.
I can tell you where the breakdown happened. Christmas. We didn't bring the claims back after the Christmas holiday.
I'm in favor of clarity and transparency and having the investigation to provide the documentation to the council so we can have it in front of us, take a look at it and make a decision from there as an appropriate step.
In that case, I'll make a motion to allow an investigation utilizing a private investigator that Mr. Owens is able to locate for the town.
Why isn't Mr. Owens doing the investigation?
Because Mr. Owens is too close to the facts, and because he serves as a town employee or as a town attorney, he informed me that he feels like it should be an outside entity that performs the investigation.
We want to,
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that third-party investigation be done into the matter. Council discussion.
I guess my concern is the money that's going to be spent when we have the documentation in front of us. We have opinion from an attorney that we already pay. The money was put back. No money really exchanged hands. Can you please not talk to him? Thank you. What are we investigating?
The only reason why I'm bringing up an investigation into this is simply because after Mr. Owens' letter came out, more information about this entire thing had come out. I would love to see every single piece of whatever.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about when you say more information came out, it's hearsay information that came out.
then we should investigate the hearsay and determine what is truthful and what is not.
How do you know that in an investigation if it's somebody just saying something?
Then let the investigator determine.
They don't determine that. They determine the paperwork and a process. That's what they determine. They don't determine if somebody is being honest or not honest, or it's their opinion, or that's not what an investigation is. They would look at the documents that we have, the process, I'm assuming we have them, the process that was followed, and decide if something basically illegal happened.
I would still like to go down this route because I want to have things that are printed out, put in front of us into a layman's term. I'm not very good at reading Black Mountain accounting software because I was never trained in how to read it. The only thing I know how to read is the claim sheet, and that is simply money that's going out. And so I would like to have an investigator be able to pinpoint everything regarding this claim, especially since it was $12,020.
In my opinion, many accusations get thrown around this council against the mayor and other things that happen within town hall. Clarity and transparency is extremely important to me. And this is what is necessary to provide clarity to the town council and to the public, and I think that's what we need to do.
I'll make a brief statement. As a public employee myself, this has happened. It's happened to me once. I went down to Napa to buy a part for my personal vehicle, jumped on the school's account. I discovered that that's what they had done. I went to the school, gave them a check, signed a statement that said that my intention was never to charge the school, that it was a mistake, and then I signed it and the clerk of the school signed it as well. I think that that is basically what we're looking at here, because as long as we can show that the check that was written with the PO and signed by the mayor and the finance officer, that there was a check written by the mayor, a personal check written by the mayor that went through the city's accounts, rectify that payment that was made to the attorney, then I think we're square. I think that's, you know, if we want to say that it was an attempt by the mayor to try to do something that they shouldn't have done, I think you can, that's a matter, that will always be a matter of opinion, no matter what. If you want to think that he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, it would be the same for anybody who tried to do something. I mean, I'm kind of putting myself in that same situation. Somebody might have thought, yeah, here he is, he bought an alternator for his pickup and tried to charge a school for it. Well, that's not what happened. I made a mistake was made along the way, and I rectified it. Signed a statement saying that a mistake was made and I fixed it. So if that's what you would like the mayor to say, I think that he would probably say that he decided that that would probably not be in good faith to try to do something like that, or to try to bring that issue up, and he resolved it. So you know, the only thing that I would be able to say is that there was a return check from the attorney and there was a personal check from Mr. Dewey. And that basically balances the books.
And we can provide all that documentation without an investigation.
I think they're unnecessary steps. I think providing that documentation initially, allowing the council to look through that documentation, and then making a determination whether or not we need to do an investigation after that. I think we need to take the appropriate steps to where we need to be. Whether, you know, about putting him on trial, an investigation, I'm also don't want to throw away the taxpayers' money in an investigation. So I think that is probably the necessary steps. Provide us with the documentation of what happened, of the entire situation. Everything from Scott And we can move forward from there. Sure.
I guess I'm a little flustered. You spoke to each person that sits up here about this, correct?
I didn't speak directly to Mr. Vick because he was privy to it through Mr. Owens.
Okay. I was asking if you have the documentation earlier. I was wondering if you had it here with you.
I don't know.
Because once I became aware of this situation, I asked for that documentation. I reviewed that. I don't know why anybody else here didn't do that. That's kind of my question 2 months later. I mean, we have a job to do, and if there's something in question, you shouldn't be afraid to ask. We don't always have to run right for somebody's throat. It's how this town has been for decades. And we don't always have to do that. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it doesn't require thousands of dollars to prove a point or not. Sometimes it's a conversation, and we've gotten away from that. I mean, my questions were answered by going in and saying, hey, let me see this paperwork. Not let me see what you're hiding. Not are you hiding anything? Not did you do anything wrong? Let me see. With the original claim, there's papers that are attached to it that back up with other examples of times that this has occurred and been okay. That's why the check was written to begin with. When it was found out that it wasn't appropriate to do that, the funds were put back that same day with documentation to show. I'm not in any mood to waste anybody's time. We do that a lot. We waste time and money. It's black and white, it's simple. And that's available to anybody who wants to see it. I mean, that's transparency. It doesn't have to be a huge issue. Everything doesn't have to be a big deal. Sometimes it's simple and it just takes a conversation. If it's something that you want to know, ask. I did. If it's something that we want to make transparent, let's make it transparent. There's nothing preventing that. Everything is of the public's eye here. But that's just my concern. I don't know why we have to go through all this every time.
I mean, I guess the only reason, or one of the reasons why I have brought this before a council meeting and whatnot, and, asking about this was because around the same time I had asked Mr. Dewey about my sidewalk stuff and the water billing stuff, and I was given an answer of, you seem to be spending an awful lot of time doing over something that I announced a month ago, rather than actually providing the documents to let me see that whether or not the water billing thing was a contract or not, which it was determined that it is a purchase agreement and not a contract, from my understanding. Instead of Mr. Dewey and I had a back and forth one day about this, and I still have yet to see this documentation. So it seems like anytime I ask for documentation, I've pretty much shown the door. I could start going in more and more and saying, I would like to see this documentation, but in this case, I would really like to see this documentation. And if it does take an investigation to get every single piece of documentation available, then that's what we have to do. However, if Mr. Dewey is willing to go and get the documentation for us to allow us to view it and then allow us to determine whether or not an investigation needs to be made, then I'll be satisfied.
Can we take a time for you to go do that? Is that appropriate?
In the interest of everyone's time, I'm happy just to, I don't want to go get it. Because it's in different places. We have revenue files, we have expenditure files. So, it's not all in one file that says this is just for this claim. It's scattered amongst all of our claims. I'm happy to pull the documentation as soon as tomorrow, scan it and email it. And if the council wants to see this item on their agenda in July, then, or sooner, if you want to call a special meeting, but if you want to see it on your next agenda, then ask for such. I have no problem with that, but I prefer the opportunity to pull all the documents together in one place, scan them in, and let you review them at once.
At this point, I'm satisfied with that.
At this point, I'll be satisfied with that as well. So.
I don't think there's any urgency. The money's back where it goes. It's not going anywhere. So. Motion on the floor is to proceed with the investigation. Is there any further council comment on that motion?
I rescind my second.
Mr. Vic, do you rescind your motion?
I'll rescind
Your second.
I will rescind the motion and then make a motion that you provide us the documentation.
Motion on the floor is that the mayor's office provide documentation regarding the matter discussed this evening. Forthwith.
Sorry.
Okay, moved by Mr. Vic, second by Mr. Shurd. Council discussion. Public comment on the motion.
Jim Caddick, Private Line Edition. I have a problem with all of this. Was there a whistleblower involved? What was the dollar amount? And someone was terminated. I think an investigation needs to be done as a taxpayer. Not, there's been no mention of dollar. Okay, and also I got a text that the camera's not working, the streaming.
I wasn't going to speak this evening. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that you just got asked 3 questions and nobody will answer them. But that's normal. I am Leanna Rodabaugh, 204 Valley Street. So my question would be, where did the money come from? What fund did you take it out of? The fact that you are willing to just pacify involves every one of your council members. If there's an illegal activity on the part of the mayor, you are now all involved. And I think you need to think seriously about that. This is criminal. Then so are all of you.
I would like to add on to that motion to see supporting documentation as to why Mr. Underwood's services were asked to no longer be needed. I do understand that he did file a resignation letter. However, as I stated, he did have an agreement with the town to stay on until a replacement was found.
Forgive me, are you amending your motion?
Correct.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
With the discussion, respectfully, Mr. Vic, I can't provide that documentation to you. It's an employment matter. Mr. Underwood was not terminated, and I can't discuss it any further than that. That's it. He's an employee. He has a right to privacy. He's not waived that right to privacy. It cannot be discussed tonight, period. And I'm not sure that I could release those employment documents or any justification to the council.
We had an initial motion that everybody was speaking to, and then it got switched right in the middle of public comment. I'm not sure if that's appropriate.
It's a little cumbersome. There's an amendment on the floor. Sorry, Ms. Haddock. It's been moved and seconded to that the amendment include into the motion that documentation supporting the employment matter be provided to the council as well. Council discussion on that.
We can't have that motion because it's not something that can be fulfilled. Not to get into my other job, but you can't discuss that. It can't be opened, that's not something that can be provided, so I don't think legally that we can have that attached to your motion. But I'm wondering if Ms. Tadwick is standing up here, we're ready to speak on the original motion that was on the floor. Can we stick with the original motion, and when it comes back to discussion, we can do amendments if we need to at that time? We're wasting people's time, and it's disrespectful.
I'll rescind my motion if you rescind the second.
Second.
Okay. Ms. Tadwick, you public
That should tell you something.
comment. Just don't sign your hands on the table, please.
Oh, okay. Apparently it's just not, well, okay, then I don't need to speak because my voice is pretty loud. I would like to know where that money came from. I think Leanna asked a question, and I think as public servants, you have the right to tell us where our money is and which fund that came out of. I don't think we can let this drop. The normal person in town isn't going to have that information unless they come in with maybe 600 people coming into City Hall. I don't know. I don't think that's fair. And in the real world, outside of this council chamber, in the real world, you would have been fine. And I think, that's not a good thing, Brandon, for you to go into somebody and say, I'm taking that money for my attorney fees. I don't think that's right. And I think you should resign tonight. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further public comment? Thank you. Okay, with that, motion on the floor is to ask that documentation be provided to the council on the matter. Most of the questions asked this evening, all the questions asked this evening will be answered through that documentation. So we'll get that out as soon as we can. Any further council discussion before I call for the vote? All right.
I would like to, I'm not gonna make another motion because we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole again right now. I would like for us to make, once we get this documentation at our first July meeting, that second Thursday, I would like for us to make a determination on whether or not we do still need to do an investigation. Allow us to handle our investigation first. And then we can have an executive session at that meeting to determine whether or not a full investigation needs to happen.
I will sign that agenda.
With that, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Workout.
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherrod
Aye.
and Councilmember Beck.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. We'll continue on with the agenda then, back to where we were with public comments from citizens on items that are not on the agenda this evening. Is there any public comment on items not listed tonight?
Vicky Mott,
Go ahead.
Vicky Mott, 389th Street. Going back to what Dempsey asked about with Robert. I think you do have a right to know, and it can be a closed meeting. But I know school board members have the right to know what happens at school with employees. And they go into a closed session so that it's not public information. So if it's something you want to know, I think you can ask for that information, but it is in a closed meeting.
Is there any further public comments? All right, I don't see anybody standing up, so we'll move on to approval of minutes. We don't have any sets this evening, correct?
And the police clerk and the town clerk.
Janelle's pulling double duty as we
I thought that we were trying to
saw our
finish
police
up.
clerk leave us. Janelle stepped up to help in that department, so we'll have a little extra time over the rest of the month to get those caught up for you. Approval of bi-weekly claims. You have claims 16783 through 16815.
I'll make a motion to approve the claims as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Mr. Vick, second by Mr. Ludington, to approve claims as presented. Any questions from council?
16792 annual fee for Montana Rail Link for an underground water pipeline crossing.
Yeah, we pay an annual fee to Montana Rail Link so that our water line can go under their railroad.
Now, isn't there two?
Yeah, that, in fact, it could be two
Okay,
$50 fees.
okay.
That's for a railroad that's no longer,
Yeah, it's not used, but it's not abandoned either.
No.
Yeah, they'll still collect on it. Any further questions from council on the claims? And public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Bertha?
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherwood
aye,
and Councilmember Vick.
Aye.
All right, your administrative reports should go relatively quickly this evening. Mr. Swing wasn't able to get a airport report into your packet for you, given how close the deadline was to the first of the month. The community development report is in your packet in terms of what the building activity looks like. There, from the planning and zoning side of things, there has been peaked interest in some possible subdivisions coming down the pike. I don't know exactly their timelines, but there are people asking regarding certain parcels of land. So you may see those. Of course, we get the standard questions on, can I do this with my property? Can I do that with that property if I buy it? That sort of thing. So that pretty well summarizes community development. Finance report, Mr. Underwood did, as you know, it's in the packet, turned in a letter of resignation. And today was his last day of work. So we're working towards, we have a small pool of applicants that we're evaluating for that position. So we'll move through that. Fire department report, Chief Motley.
Again, it should be in your packet, but real quickly, we'll run over this. Maybe. So calls for the month of May were 58 requests for service, 21 in the town, 36 in the district. There was one mutual aid request. Of those, we had 50 medicals, 6 fires, and 2 auto accidents for the 58. So far, we're at 302 requests for service for the year. Last year, we were right at that 700 mark, so we're right in line to hit that or exceed that again. So which stands to reason as we get busier in town, with people coming through, moving in, whatever, we're gonna have more requests, so. That's where that's at. So year to date, we're 99 in town, 198 within the district. Of that, 241 were medical, 40 were fire, and then 21 crashes for the 302. Other than that, within the fire department, your fire department, we're just responding to calls, doing what we can do. We don't really have any big things going on, which in my book is a good place to be. We are working through the budget and we should be online and ready to move forward with that when it comes up. So, any questions?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, Parks and Recreation, Mr. Senstein.
I'll just kind of skim through this. You have the bulk of it in your packet. We finally got a maintenance person for parks. So this was the first week I've had some help, which has been fantastic. So we have someone out there mowing and weed whacking. He's working 4 days a week. We got the bathrooms fixed up after the vandalism down at Lewis Park Park. We got a couple new trash cans out at River Park because we had a lot of dumping taking place. Few events we had, the American Legion did both the cemeteries and Veterans Park for Memorial Day. Those went off really well. Bob Lewis Memorial down at River Park, we planted 4 apple trees in his honor. We have some more donations coming through. I got one today. So we'll be adding a few more apple trees to that and getting a plaque in remembrance of Bob Lewis. The party in the park for Bob was a great success. About 400 people. I don't know the exact money of donations they received, but it was thousands. It was a very, very good event that went off really well. With the pool, it's full, it's heating. We're shooting for Monday opening. We're hoping for tomorrow, but we have a couple issues and the weather didn't help us out at all. We're trying to get it up to temp. And because of the cold weather and rain today, it looks like we're gonna have to push it till Monday. But we are booked up in excess in lessons. I think this will be one of the best seasons the pool's ever seen for revenue with lessons. So that's good. It's kind of gonna carry its weight and it's awesome. About half of them are new first time kids for lessons. So that's great to see in our community. We're meeting that need of people around us. Bunch of pavilion rentals coming up. I think we have 6 scheduled for June. We had 4 in May. And working with the park board, we're getting ready to order the play structure for Father Valley Park. We finalized on a choice. I got the quote back, so I'm gonna send that out to the park board tomorrow to get final input. And another thing the park board wanted us to look into was updating Premier Gardens picnic tables. So that's something I'll be addressing with the new budget cycle. Any questions?
Thanks, Bobby. All right, next up is the police department report. Chief Sosa.
You have the statistical information already for you. In addition to that, I have a handful of blocks that I have left to block walk. Not done many doors. Purpose of that was to introduce myself to the community and to try to determine what the community's needs were, so we could try to target that as far as the police department's concerned. I've learned a lot, and we're trying to focus our efforts in those areas. I learned that there was a large community support for talks to begin with the superintendent over at the schools. Those talks began. We're exploring possible ways of financing what I'm saying is a community service officer, not a school resource officer. My idea would be to have an officer over at the schools for 9 months out of the year and for 3 months out of the year, continuing to work with the youth, the children over at the parks. That's my idea. The superintendent agreed with what I proposed. So I'm sure that we'll be providing you with information that in the future, along with possible funding possibilities for that. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Right, the public works report is included in the packet. Mr. Cruz planned to be here and had something come up last minute. Would apologize as he's not able to come present the report. But if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll try to get those answered. We will probably some of the public work stuff will be addressed in the PER discussion coming up. So there's no guests to recognize this evening. In correspondence, you have resignation of Councilmember Patrick Sherd and resignation of Town Attorney Scott Owens included in the packet. There's no public hearings or unfinished business to address, so we'll move right into new business. We have discussion decision on the 2021 water system preliminary engineering report. Craig Cabrera is here from HDR to kind of give you an overview of what that report entails. And kind of engage in a conversation. I'll just tell you, based on the presentation that he and I discussed and that you'll see, we're going to kind of delve into the American Rescue Plan funding in this conversation as well. So your A and B item in new business are probably going to. With that, I'll turn it over to Craig.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I'll try to pause kind of between the PER findings and the American Recovery Plan Act discussion, but it's good to see everybody. It's been a long time since I've been down here and been able to actually see people and speak to you guys in person. So that's kind of nice. I'm enjoying that. Actually being able to see people face to face for a change. We started working on this preliminary engineering report for the town of Stevensville, upwards to about a year ago, I think. It's been a while. There was a preliminary engineering report done back in around 2009. There was a phased approach to making water system improvements included in that. The first 3 phases of that work were complete. The 4th phase was put on hold because the funding agencies wanted to see the town get the system metered and get the leakage under control. The fourth phase was to construct a new water tank for the town. Anyway, with that, this was going to be an update to that preliminary engineering report, and we can move into it here now. I'll kind of go through what we're finding. You can go to the next one. So we'll talk about the preliminary engineering report, planning area, population projections, the water system demand, leakage, the hydraulic model update that we did, fire flow analysis, water storage analysis. So there's 3 parts of the system that we evaluate. One is the supply, which is your wells. The other one is the distribution system. The hydraulic model is used to evaluate the distribution system. And then water storage, last but not least. So we'll look at those things. We'll talk about the results, and then we'll move into talking about the American Recovery Plan Act funding and how that might play into getting some of the improvements that are needed to the system completed. So we can move on. So like I said, we analyzed the distribution system, the water supply, and the storage. We looked at a 20-year planning horizon, we're out to 2040 when we looked at population projections and the resultant demand to the system. We did look at the past study, obviously, and we solicited feedback from town staff. Go ahead. So this is the planning area for the 2009 preliminary engineering report that was completed. It hasn't changed a lot. We can go to the next. This is the planning area from the growth policy. You see Creekside Meadows and Twin Creeks subdivision. They potentially add about 255 water connections, and then areas considered for annexation. There's land north surrounding the Tippid, East 2nd Street, South and East Side Highway, West Creekside Meadows. To the south, there's a lot of potential for annexation and development in that area. And then east along north Middle Burnt Fork Road and West Logan Road, and then west, across the river, the potential of the Wyatt area annexing into the system. Go ahead. So we looked at a lot of different things with regard to population growth in the area. They included the 1990 to 2000 growth rate that actually occurred, the 2000-2014 growth rate, and then the Red Valley County projected growth rate. And what we really landed on was the middle of the road, the 2.18% growth rate per year. So we use that to project population out to 2040. Go ahead, Brandon. And this is a really complicated table. It's hard to read. So I'll just try to give you the high points. If you look at the bottom, it kind of gives you what the population would be at a 1% of 2.18%, and then the higher 3% growth rate. So we have an existing population estimated to be about 2182. So at a 1%, you have 2661. 3359 at the 2.18 and 3941 at the 3%. So like I said, we chose the middle of the road, 2.18% in my experience doing planning in Montana for the last 25 years. 2% is a pretty aggressive growth rate. But under the current situation and with the pandemic and growth occurring in Montana, it's probably not on this. So what we do then is we use that population, and under current conditions, we look at water usage and we come up with per capita demand factors. And then we apply those per capita demand factors to the population growth to arrive at demand on the system. So this is specifically looking at water demand and analyzing your supply. So looking at things like average day demand, max day demand, unaccounted for water, and then the firm capacity of your supply, which is your wells. So that's how much water you can supply with the largest well out of service. That's a DEQ requirement. They require us to look at the system that way. And then that gives us a remaining supply under average day demand and a remaining supply under max day demand. So the good news here is under the 2040 growth projections, you have plenty of remaining supply. You know, about 400,000 gallons per day of excess supply. So that's good news. That gives you a little breathing room if you have a well out of service or maintenance needs to be done. So we're in pretty good shape on the supply side. Go ahead. One of the big concerns in the past has been unaccounted for water or leakage in the system. Since the 2009 PR was done, pretty much the entire system is now metered. So we have a good handle on where your water's going for the most part. And we can really identify how much water is being produced from the well field and how much water is actually being served to users and that gives us that differential, and that's your unaccounted for water. The town has been doing leak detection surveys to try to identify where leaks are in the system and getting those fixed. Things that are a little bit more difficult to identify are service line leaks, because a lot of times they can be downstream of or they can be between the pipe in the road and the meter, so you don't see that leakage. Significant improvements were made since 2009. However, we still have a pretty large percentage of unaccounted for water in the system. If you look at it, there's additional improvements to alleviate or reduce the leakage could regain a significant amount of capacity in the system. So you see the percentage of unaccounted for water in comparison to the water that's produced is quite large. Go ahead. So distribution system analysis, like I said, we took the old hydraulic model that the town had and we updated that with new demand values, improved distribution of that demand. We updated all the as-built information from the system from recent development and the new pump curves for the new well field. The good news is velocities and pressures in the system are within the range for current and projected demands. The model really gives us a more accurate tool to understand distribution system growth. So I know you're not going to be able to see this. You'll be able to see it in the report better than this, but this is just a look at fire flow in the system under a 2020 average day demand. The point of this is really the only significant issue the distribution system has, other than the leakage, of course, is we can't produce or get to the fire flow requirement along Main Street in the downtown. There's a 3,500 gallon a minute fire flow requirement there, and we can't hit that, at least not out of a single hydrant. And if you go to the next one, this is really just looking at the same thing under 2040. There's nothing different other than we still can't make that 3,500 gallon minute fire downtown unless we make some improvements. But as far as system pressures go and fire flow in other parts of the system, it looks pretty good. So water storage, last but not least, and there are several things we look at when we look at water storage. We look at operational storage, which is really the storage you have between your pumps turning off and the pumps turning back on in the well field. So you're trying to keep that tank at a fairly high volume so that you've got plenty of water to serve a fire or other things. Equalization storage is looking at the fluctuation between like a peak hour event and just an average day. So you've got some storage there to ride through some of those real high demand periods. And then the big one is the emergency or fire flow storage. That's that 3,500 gallon minute demand for a 3-hour period of time. And then we always include some dead storage, which is really just a little bit of storage at the bottom of your tank. You never like to completely drain your tank because there's sediment and things in the bottom of that tank. You don't want to suck that into the system. Go ahead and go to the next. So looking at that 2020 to 2040 period of time under the demand conditions and the population projections, bottom line is we're short on storage given that 3,500 gallon a minute, 3-hour fire demand. So when you look at it under 2020, we're about 235,000 gallons short. Out to 2040, obviously that continues to get worse as you add people to the system. So we're about 280,000 gallons short on storage in the system right now. Go ahead. And this is really tough to see, but bottom line is there's a couple of different alternatives that we looked at. One included rehabilitating the existing tank and adding another tank. What we're saying is you really need about 1 million gallons worth of storage, and the existing tank is about half of that. So if we rehabilitate that tank, we want to build another like 500,000 gallon tank along with that somewhere in the system. The other thing we looked at is, okay, maybe we don't want to rehabilitate the old tank. We just want to build a new tank. You need a new 1 million gallon tank. We looked at locations that included somewhere adjacent to the existing tank site. We looked at maybe putting one across the river in the hills above the Y, and we looked at out at the airport. And the reason we looked at those were just hydraulically, they were an elevation that worked. So we didn't make a recommendation as to where you should put that tank. There are a lot of factors involved in that. That probably needs to be evaluated further when we get into moving on with final design and building a tank. You're gonna have to buy property, you're gonna have to take care of a lot of things there. So as far as the financial evaluation of constructing a new tank, we just said, let's look at building a new 1 million gallon tank, because if we rehabilitate the other tank, the costs are probably going to be about the same. I mean, we're going to have to put money into rehabilitating the tank. The new tank will be smaller, but probably apples to apples, it's kind of a wash. Go ahead, Brandon. So the key projects identified in the preliminary engineering report to be completed for the system. Number one is constructing a new water tank, so you have the volume of water you need for fire demand in the system. And then doing water main replacements to reduce the amount of non-revenue water leakage in the system. Just for argument's sake, we looked at, well, what if we replace the 12-inch it's actually a 6-inch main that runs down Main Street, which if you remember, that's where our fire flow issues are. If we replace that with a 12-inch, that would be a part of that water main replacement. And then from there, we would prioritize water main replacements depending on the age of the pipe, the diameter of the pipe, and where town staff has experienced a lot of breaks or identified leaks. So that and how much you do is really dependent on how much money do you have to put into that. The other one that was identified was upgrading the water system SCADA system. So that's system communication and data acquisition. The system, the water system SCADA is kind of antiquated, and it's through a vendor that charges you money every time you call them up to do any kind of maintenance on the system. The wastewater treatment plant, the town staff really likes the SCADA system the wastewater treatment plant has. It's modern, it's up to date. It's something that anybody could work on. You don't need a proprietary vendor that is located out of state to work on it. What we'd like to do is take that and modernize the water system, SCADA system, so it's on the same platform. So town staff, as you know, your water and wastewater staff, they do both. I mean, they're jacks of all trades. So what we'd like to be able to do is have it so that they're familiar with that program and they have it on either a common laptop that people can take home with them, or they can get to it on their home computer or on their phone. Most modern systems, you can get to all this stuff on your phone, so they can respond to alarms and take care of the simple stuff without having to drive all the way into town or to the water, the pumping facility or the treatment plant. For the simple things that they could just address by, looking at an alarm on their phone and acknowledging it. So those are the main projects that we identified. Go ahead, Brad. And then these are the costs associated with that. So a 1 million gallon water tank would be about $1.5 million. 12-inch Main Street improvement or replacing the 6-inch pipe on Main Street with a 12 would be about $624,000. SCADA system improvements about $265,000 for a total project cost of right at about $2.4 million.
Are those modern costs, meaning you
Yeah,
calculate based off of
those have all been updated to the current
the
costs.
current economy?
And that's all in engineering. I'm going to pause right there for just a second and see if anybody's got any questions with current preliminary engineering report. And then we can talk about some of the funding stuff that's out there that is interesting, to say the least.
Are there any questions from the council on what we reviewed so far? I know it's riveting information.
So with SCADA, that's hardware and software.
Yeah, it would be PLC and probably some radios and some programming. So you've got the well field, at least one tank, maybe two, and then there's one lift station in the sewer system as well that's not connected. So we would put a remote terminal unit and a radio in each one of those facilities tied into the wastewater treatment plant. And then we'd have to build the SCADA screens that show that equipment, alarms and the functions of that. And this is
Currently, if there's an alarm, they come into town. We have one employee who lives in Hamilton, and if they'll be on call for that 7-day rotation, and a simple alarm goes off, that they could have just reset the computer. That's costly to us. As we pay. So, for sure.
When you discuss about, prioritizing water issues, it was brought, I think it was in the community. And I've lost the name of, but it described the west trunk lines being needing to be replaced or needing to be enlarged. Is that one of those things that would be prioritized on that list?
We talking about the sewer main on Park Street?
Yes.
That's a separate project.
Yeah.
That's an extent, that sewer line doesn't exist yet. We're adding it. Craig, when we previously talked in the PER in early phases, we talked about 3,500 gallon a minute fire flow, and then the possibility of what does our situation look like if that fire flow were less. I think the downtown fire flow is really implicated by a specific structure. And that one structure is what's killing us.
Yeah, that's 3,500 gallon a minute fire for 3 hours is a lot of water. And that definitely has a huge impact on your storage capacity. If that could be reduced, that gets your storage requirement down quite a bit. Now there are other things associated with storage in your existing tank. It's very old. we think it might be leaking. And you don't have any redundancy there, so it's hard to, every once in a while you have to take a tank out of service to clean it, do repairs, and that's nearly impossible to do with the way the system's set up right now, because you don't have another tank anywhere that can provide that volume of water while you're doing that, so. But it would definitely reduce the volume of a second tank and thus the cost.
Okay. You want to get into the money of it?
You want me to
Let her rip.
give my spiel here?
I don't think anyone said yes.
My life has been absolutely consumed by American Rescue Plan Act funding, and I'm going to tell you everything I know, and it seems to be evolving a little bit still, and there's lots of training sessions out there and videos you can watch on the state's websites and DNRC's websites, but I'll give you what I know. So with the American Rescue Plan Act, there are 3 buckets of money, and then this is money that's available for water and sewer infrastructure projects. There's money that's coming directly to communities and counties through the U.S. Treasury. That's local fiscal recovery funds. The town of Stevensville, as far as we know right now, and this changes a little bit here and there, but I think maybe it's set now, is $529,270. 50% of that money is going to be paid in June of 2021. You may have received it. I don't know.
It's on its way.
It's on its way. The other 50% of that money is going to be paid in June of 2022. I think there might be I think you might have to track what you do with that money, but it's yours. You don't have to compete for it. There's no requirement there. There's certain things you can use for it. The second bucket of money is the state of Montana minimum allocation grants. This is the stuff that went through House Bill 632. And Stevensville's allocation under that is $327,806. That is money that you do have to apply for. Applications are going to be accepted between July 15th, 2021 to January 1st, 2023. There is a match requirement for that money. And like I said, there's an application, there's certain things you can use that money for. It's water, sewer, broadband, I believe. And the match is the lesser of 25% of the $529,270 that you're getting in treasury money, or 1-to-1. In the case of Stevensville, 25% of the 529, and I don't have that number right because we updated this and I forgot to do that. It's more like 132. Yeah. But anyway, that's the lesser. So you do have to match that in order to get the 327,806. You can use your own funds to match that. You can use treasury funds to match that. And then the interesting one is the third bucket of money, which is state of Montana competitive grants. The state of Montana has about $177 million out there that's available through a competitive grant process for water and wastewater and irrigation projects. Applications are going to be accepted July 15th. So there is a deadline for the application of that, and that's July 15th, 2021. So we've got about a month. The most money you can apply for is $25 million for any single grant. You can apply for wastewater, you can apply for water. Those need to be separate grant applications. The sewer utility and water utility needs to be separate. You can use treasury money to match this, and you can use the minimum allocation grant money to match this. There isn't a specific match requirement. You don't have to match anything. But part of the criteria is affordability, and match plays into that. So a 1-to-1 match, you'd get full points. So we've been advising people that you should consider a 1-to-1 match if you can, because that's going to get you the most points in the process. Go to the next slide. So how does this look for the town of Stevensville? You've got the 327 and House Bill 632 or minimum allocation grant money. You've got 529 in treasury money. The town is, since that 2009 PER, you've adjusted your rates and passed bonds to be putting money away to do water system projects. So just roughly, we've got about $1 million put away that you can use for water system improvement projects. So you can use, you've got to match the House bill money. But other than that, you can use everything that's left out of either the town funds or the treasury funds, whichever you decide to match with, for competitive grant. So just theoretically, if you decided you were going to do a 1-to-1 match, you could match $1.7 million in competitive grant. So if you were successful in getting the competitive grant for the water system project, you'd have $3.6 million to do a project, to do your project. So go to the next slide. So again, the competitive grant criteria, number one is human health and safety. Fire flow fits into that category. It's probably doesn't get you as many points as having had 6 boil orders in the last year, but the good news is you do a pretty good job of operating and maintaining your utility, so you don't have a lot of human health and safety problems in Stevensville. That's a good thing. Unfortunately, you might not get full points on that. Affordability is another criteria. I think you guys would score pretty well here. They compare your rates to the target rates that are identified by the Department of Commerce. I think you guys are over that, and you certainly would be if you had to borrow money to do a $3.6 million project. It would push your rates even farther. So I think you rank pretty well on the affordability, or score pretty well on the affordability. Readiness to proceed includes things like having a preliminary engineering report done, which we're very, we've got a draft of that completed. We need, comments, and we'll clean that up and finish it. Having done a growth policy, you've got an updated growth policy. Having selected your engineer, you've already done that. So you're fairly ready to proceed with going on with this project. It's mainly just figuring out how much money you really have to do the project. And then conservation, resiliency to climate change is another criteria. Water main replacement and reducing the leakage in your system absolutely fits in that category and is important. So I think you'd rank pretty well on that. So I think the forms for the applications for both the minimum allocation grant money and the competitive grant money are going to be on the state's website Monday. So we're going to be able to start evaluating what that looks like a lot more closely. But I think you guys would rank fairly well with the competitive grants. The good news is this is fast. They're going to accept these grant applications July 15th. They're going to rank them and decide who gets grant money by August 15th. That's going to go to the governor's office and the committee that he's got set up. They're going to look at it and make recommendations, and the governor's going to sign off on it. So if you're successful in getting the competitive grant, you're going to know pretty fast. You're going to know by end of August probably. What does that mean? If you don't get the competitive grant money, no harm, no foul. Really didn't cost you a lot of money to submit the application, and you didn't lose any of your money. You still have the treasury money. You still have the minimum allocation grant money. They're talking about there being a second round of competitive grant and potentially even a third. So you don't have to have an application in for the minimum allocation grant money until July 1st of 2023. So you've got plenty of time. You're not going to lose that money. You got time to think about it and figure out what you want to do. So go ahead. So, I guess looking at what does this look like with the system and the project. So we looked at, okay, what if we put a tank out at the Y? we're saying we've got about $3.6 million if we were successful in getting the competitive grant money. If we put the 12, we replace the 6-inch main in Main Street with a 12, we do the skating improvements, we build a tank. With a tank at the Y, you have to get connected, you got to connect that to the water system. And there's a length of pipe there that would have to be installed, and that'd be about $1.2 million. And then, you know, if you look at, well, if you really were going to get water across the river and serve the Y, it's about another 2.9 million to get water and sewer to it. That, you know, there's other ways to fund that. You don't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily have to come out of the water system funds. But, you know, you'd be short about 2.9 million on that one. So if we put a tank at the airport, same scenario, we build all the same stuff, you still have to tie that pipe into the system. That's about another $1.7 million. You would have about $489,000 left to do water main replacement. That'd be about 3,260 feet of 8-inch water main. So that gets you quite a bit of water main replacement in town to work on reducing that leakage. Last scenario we looked at two here. I didn't put them both on here. We looked at an existing tank somewhere close to where the or a new tank somewhere close to where the existing tank is. And we also looked at an elevated tank close to town. And the reason that's important is that, you know, that the cost of tying that into the system is significantly less than putting a tank, you know, out at the airport or over the water. That would leave you close to $1.2 million left to do water main replacement work in town, which is about 1.5 miles of pipe. That's a lot of pipe you could get in the ground if you did that. This kind of gives you an idea of, you know, how far that money might go for the town. Go ahead, Brandon. So, you know, we're recommending that you utilize the minimum allocation grant funds and the treasury funds to leverage as much competitive grant money as you can. I think you rank fairly well. You're going to find out pretty fast. You can reassess after that, but we would submit the grant in that July 15th, 2021 timeframe, and we would include the water tank. We'd include the SCADA system, and we would include water main replacement. The beauty of the water main replacement part of that is if you get bids and they come in low and you have extra money, you could add more water main to the project. If they come in high, you could reduce the amount of water main in the project to fit the budget that you have. And I specifically asked the question to the grant people, are you going to get penalized for that? If you say you're going to do 7,000 feet of water main and you only do 5 because bids came in high, do you lose grant money? And they didn't know. You can have bid alternates. You can reduce the scope of the project to fit the budget. So that's good news. So I think we're here both to preview the PER for you guys and then to also talk about giving us the go ahead to submit a grant or to assist the city in submitting that grant for the competitive money. Any questions?
Yeah, first question is, who's scoring the grants?
So there's a committee. It's the typical players, Anna Miller, DNRC, Gus Byron, Department of Commerce, Rachel Clark, who I think it was at DEQ. I think now she might be working at DNRC. But there's a committee that's going to rank them. And then there's the governor's, what we call it, his board or his committee that he's set up. And if you go on the website, who they are and their names, it's all in there. So the ranking committee is going to make recommendations to the governor's committee, and then I don't know if they, they're gonna evaluate that, and then if it's all approved, it goes to the governor's office and signs off.
Here's my question, what are the benefits of putting the tank at the Y versus the airport versus, I mean, I think the benefit of the existing locations is obvious. Are there other,
Well, I think the key thing there's a couple of things. The benefit of putting it somewhere else besides the existing tank site is it gives you another direction water can come from.
Mhm.
So say the pipe going out Burnt Fork Road comes apart and both tanks are out there. Now you've cut off all of your storage because it's all coming through one straw into town. So that's one advantage of having it somewhere else. There's the question of land and where can you acquire land? If you can't get anybody to sell you an appropriate piece of land somewhere in the vicinity of the existing tank, then you might be looking at going somewhere else, whether it be the airport or the Y. You got to find it, or an elevated tank. I don't know how people feel about that, but typically that doesn't go over great with the public, especially when you have a view shed like Stevensville. People don't want to see that. They like to see the mountains, but that's an option. I mean, you can put that about anywhere, put it at the elevation. Then you're talking about, 100-foot tall tank.
I grew up around a lot of raised water tanks, I like them. Just
Like elevated water tanks myself.
Yeah, typically,
You don't see a lot of them.
once they're there, people don't notice them. You don't see a lot in this part of the world because we have lots of elevation, but if you go a lot of other places, yeah, there's lots of elevated tanks. We're looking at doing one for Kalispell right now.
I guess probably my biggest question then would be, are we looking at? I think we probably would be looking at a substantial increase in electricity and pumping to someplace outside, further than where we're at now.
No, it's, everything's gonna operate on the same hydraulic rate line.
Okay.
So the pressure of the system doesn't change. So the pumps are gonna be pumping against the same pressure. So they're gonna run at the same speed and the same pressure and the same head. So the electrical requirements would be good.
Well, if you put it at the airport, you just have the airport.
Oh.
Never.
No, but they'd really like to have it up there, I'm pretty sure.
It'd be great for the fire.
So are the fire department.
Yeah, I think that, that's one consideration when we talk about outside of the existing system, is it does give you the ability to extend services, especially fire suppression services, but water services to areas that eventually will have a high demand for them. In 2018, the council asked that we commission a annexation study of why, and that's where that $2.9 million figure came from, and that was the distribution system for that area. And that was water and sewer combined, correct? The 2.9. So the assumption in Craig's chart is that if you extend it, if you put water there, you would assume you're going to put sewer there too. That's that 2.9 million. So yeah, I think when you look at the growth of the community and where services are needed, where potential tax base could be, you can weigh those with where's the best place for that location if you choose an alternative to the current site.
I think the first step is moving forward and applying for the competitive grant and then seeing where we're at from that point. In regards to determining the location.
And we can go that route in terms of saying we're going to do a storage project, X, Y, Z, and then come back with the design and say this is where it goes.
Yeah, and I think the funding agencies through the process are looking for So I think that a town council has said, yes, we want to use.
I think it's very exciting news considering after reading, we're losing 96 gallons a minute out of our current storage tank. That's a lot of water.
Water mains in Main Street, they under the street.
I believe so, yeah.
Under the street.
Well, they're under the asphalt.
Okay.
It kind of depends on where.
They're not on the sidewalk side. They're on sidewalk.
No, they're either in the driving lane or in the parking area. They're not on the sidewalks.
So I think that was late 70s.
They made me do everything in 1980
Was it 80?
when they did the storm drains.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did the water main then or not. I wasn't here.
Yeah, and you might, we really haven't gotten into that discussion with staff yet about exactly where you would replace mains. That, you may decide that, well, we don't want to do that. There's a lot of fairly new pavement and curb and sidewalk, it seems like. And maybe that one isn't known to have a lot of leaks, and maybe we find another way to get the fire flow in that area better, and maybe there's other parts of town that are a higher priority for replacement. Just an example, I think, project. I think the point being, you do the water tank, you do the SCADA system, you're gonna have some amount of money left, and however many lineal feet of pipe you can get done for that amount of money, you do it.
So the only other wrench I'll throw into this is the assumptions in the numbers you saw this evening include using all the treasury funds, the 529,000, include using all of those funds. The council is not yet engaged in a conversation as how they'd like to see those funds budgeted. Those funds are much more flexible than the other funding that Craig mentioned tonight, the other two buckets. Where you can use the treasury funds to offset lost revenue in certain formulas. You can do some other more creative things in programming for your community and that sort of thing. So I know that the administration has some ideas with those funds. I don't know that we have $500,000 worth of ideas. We can come up with some, but that should be a consideration as well. As we're talking about priorities, is how much of that funding are you willing to commit to the project? If there are other competing priorities that funding could help with in the organization. And I don't know if you have to answer that tonight necessarily, because you do have some time. The application is due July 15th. We have a council meeting July 8th. So if you're okay with the priorities expressed in the PER, I think we could go ahead and get everything drafted up with numbers and figures, and you could fine tune that on the 8th. Is that fair, Craig?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of how much money you want to throw into that pot for matching that compared to grants. And again, I mean, you don't have to do a 1-to-1 match either. I mean, decide you want it. I think once we get into it and we see where you are with regard to all of the factors that go into the affordability equation and scoring, we might decide that, well, we don't really need to go as far as a 1-to-1. Maybe you could leverage a 1-to-1.
Sure. And I think we could better evaluate the water fund to determine exactly how much funding the water fund could contribute to the project. So I think tonight we're just looking for the council to consent to us moving in the direction of priorities defined. Putting it as vaguely as I can.
Based on what I'm seeing on the agenda, I would make a motion that we go ahead and apply for grant funding for items that are of recommendation in the preliminary engineering report.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Ludington, second by Mr. Vick, to move forward with the grant application for American Rescue Plan Act funding with the priorities outlined in the preliminary engineering. Council discussion? Public comment?
And I think just for further clarification, this is kind of taking items A and B and putting them together because they are so closely related. Because that's basically the recommendations of the preliminary engineering report is that we do need upgrades in the water system, and that without these ARPA funds and grants, that there will be beyond our scope of being able to afford.
Any further council discussion or public comment on the project? All right. Oh, Mr. Chadwick.
How many gallons a month are we losing now on leaks?
It's close to 100,000.
It's actually closer to 14 million.
A lot.
Yeah.
Would it make more sense to fix the leaks?
If we
Can't
can find them.
them.
The biggest problem that we're having now from my conversations with Mr. Cruz is that part of the problem we have is identifying where those leaks are. And if that's a geological issue, because the surface water in this area is high. So normally what you would do is you go to the street where you know the water connection is, and you put a listening device there. And if you hear water rushing, you got a leak. Well, you'll do that here, and you hear water rushing everywhere. So you can't really tell where they are. He's doing a lot of investigation now to try to find another type of system for us to be able to detect leaks. Instead of going around digging up spots and trying to find where we think they might be. We've done a lot of that already.
And we've chased. And a lot of the leakage is main replacement. And the other part of our leakage, it's either main replacement or it's services that some services we know leak. Some of those will get replaced with Third Streets project. A lot of those services are back on the homeowner to replace. They're not responsibility of the town necessarily, but we lean on those folks to fix them. Some we don't even know that they leak, we just assume they are. So it just kind of depends on the time of year and all of those factors, irrigation sort of things, where where we fluctuate in the percentage of water we use or we lose. In the wintertime, it's as high, sometimes as 80%. It just kind of depends on the and we caught a number of pretty serious leaks this spring that were resolved, and we saw production when we, like the next day, as soon as we fixed the leak, we looked at the pump logs and it went down immediately. So we know we're getting a small handle on it. The tank rehabilitation, we think will resolve it a lot because we're, the 96,000 is a good estimate. But some of our estimates at one point were that it was losing somewhere around 4 million gallons a month. So that's a big number to think about. Further public comment? Would you mind please stepping to the podium?
Leslie Catholic. I'll find out the lawyer mic. Leslie Catholic, 509 Mission Street. I just have a question. Is this the total for this going to be added on what we already owe on our water, and how much have we paid on the last water section that we did? I understood that we were just paying interest. Have we paid down that bond at all? Thank you.
I don't know the specifics of where we are in terms of principal and interest. But our bond payment does pay down both principal and interest. Those are relatively new bonds. So, we can find that information, bring that to you, but this isn't this project isn't additional debt that the taxpayers or the ratepayers would take on. We're leveraging cash that we have or getting from the state with additional grant funds that we will get. So there's no debt involved in this project at all. So we're talking about a $3.5 million project with no debt at all. And we would be able to take that cash and pay down our debt. And that wouldn't be reasonable either, and the grants would allow us to do that.
Yeah, I would just add, Brandon, that the funding agencies will not allow you to only pay interest on your debt. It's all set up, you're paying principal and interest, you have to have a certain amount of reserve set aside, all of that's. So, and yeah, this is adds nothing to your rates.
In fact, I'd add that we paid a bit higher of a rate in order to put us in this kind of a financial position, so that when these opportunities are available, we actually have some cash sitting aside to leverage those funds. And that's the position we're in today, is because everybody paid a little bit extra on their water bill than originally anticipated, so that we had some money set aside for this specific project, for the water storage project. It was the last phase of the improvements PCI proposed. Any further public comment? Chief Mellon.
I understand we need to go after the leakage, the loss. But the real picture here is we need water storage. I mean, if we have zero loss and no storage, we still don't meet the need and the demand that we need to have to service the community.
Chief Motley, I got a quick question for you, and this isn't gonna, I mean, it's really about the location. Being the fire chief, where would you prefer the best location for your storage to be at?
Well, I mean, I'm just hearing the conversation tonight, it would seem to me that the redundancy piece is huge. I mean, if we put all our eggs in one basket, one straw, say, coming into the system,
Correct.
from fire, from emergency services standpoint, it really doesn't make sense. We're all about redundancy. So in light of that, I mean, if we can have two storage systems, wherever, however located, feeding into the system, so if we lose one, we still have one, that totally makes sense to me.
Well,
I don't know that it's east side, west side, north, south, I don't know that. I mean, that comes back to what makes sense, one fiscally and all those types of things.
You're more concerned where the hydrant is.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that would come into, well, it's really better if we put it here, because now we only run 2 miles with a line, or we put over here, we run 5 miles. I mean, those types of things all kind of play into it. And to the mayor's point, if we see growth is gonna happen on the other side of the river, that would make a lot of sense to put something over there. But again, that's pretty preliminary in my mind right now, what those decisions are. But storage, need storage.
Oh, correct.
All right, last call for public comment. All right, motion on the floor, as you're aware, is to proceed with the grant application as discussed tonight. With that, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Bertha.
Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
Councilmember Sherrod,
Aye.
and Councilmember Vic.
Aye.
Motion passes. Do you want your thumb drive back?
Thank you all, sure. Do you need a copy of that?
Just email me. Oops. Guys should invest in some.
I know. Thank you all for your
Thanks,
time.
Greg.
Okay. With those two items out of the way, we'll move into discussion decision on the special event alcohol use permit for Bikers Against Bullies event. This event is an event application for use of Lewis and Clark Park. Application is straightforward and is in your packet for your review.
I'll make a motion to approve the special event permit for bikers against police.
A second.
It's been moved by Mr. Vick, seconded by Ms. Devlin to approve the special event, alcohol use permit for bikers against police. Council discussion, questions? Public comment. All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote then. Ms. Bertha?
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Livingston.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherman.
Aye.
And Councilmember Vick.
Okay, next item of business is discussion decision on the request variance to town code to remove 2 large maple trees belonging to the town of Stevensville. Somebody put this really large PER in the packet, so bear with me.
Good answer.
Okay, so the council communication or agenda communication in the packet kind of gives you an outline as to what's being requested here. This is basically an administrative decision appeal regarding tree removal on town-owned right-of-way where Mr. McCann of 102 East Fifth Street has asked to remove 2 mature trees, maple trees that are within our right-of-way. And the right-of-way and his front yard kind of look like the same thing, but his house is just really close to the edge of the right of way. Correct. And he's looking to install solar panels on the south facing roof of his home. However, the trees, 2 mature trees would block the sun from his solar panels, thereby rendering them useless. So he asked to cut them down. Staff reviewed the site and made a recommendation that those trees not be removed. Mr. McCann appealed that decision, and so the next step is to ask the town council, shall he chop the tree down or not?
I'm a big fan of trees, but I'm also a big fan of solar systems and people being able to utilize those systems to supply their own electricity. But I drove by the property today. Those trees are huge and they are too close to his home. Those root systems, if not now, are going to eventually damage his structure. And in my opinion, they should be brought down for that reason. So removing 2 trees, and he's agreed to plant 3 new trees. I think it's a reasonable request from my opinion. I mean, those are giant trees, 7 feet from his front door. So I will make a motion to allow this individual to remove those trees and plant the new trees.
I will second that.
It's been moved by Mr. Sherb, second by Mr. Vick, to approve the removal of the trees with the replacements. Council discussion further.
Northwest Energy has just undertaken a program to participate in solar project on your phone to help you reduce your electricity usage. Helping you fill out forms for tax incentives through the government, and showing you how much you will save and that sort of thing. So I think that this is an opportune time for us to see somebody take advantage of that, put some solar panels on his house.
Any further council discussion?
Yeah, the only other thing I was gonna say is, well, I think it's no secret. I love trees as well here too. That's why I got a degree in them. But, and I do hate to see that these older maple trees get taken down, but as trees get older and they no longer grow, they no longer help with reducing the amount of carbon that is produced in our area. And so with Mr. McCann's proposed replacement of 3 Saskatoon serviceberry trees, I believe in replacing 2 large, possibly close to end of life maple trees with 3 new fruit bearing trees will actually not only help reduce his carbon footprint by using solar panels, but will also help out the town as well.
Any further council discussion? Any public comment? Ms. Molly?
Vicky Motley. At whose cost are the trees going to be removed?
It would be solely his.
I'm for trees.
Any further public comment? All right, hearing none, then we'll go forward and call for the vote. Ms. Bergman?
Councilmember Devlin. Aye. Councilmember Langton.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherb.
Aye.
And Councilmember Vic.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. You received your administrative reports this evening, so that really kind of covers the executive report. We have your direction to provide some supplemental documentation regarding the issue previously discussed in the beginning of the meeting. We have wrapped up the advertising that we will extend for a new town attorney. We did not receive any or qualification statements of qualifications on a new city attorney. So we'll re-advertise that. We advertised it in 3 different papers originally. And then pushed the information out to several contacts we had in the legal community to see if we could drum up some interest in being a new attorney, given that Mr. Owens is asked not to renew his contract past July 12th. So if for some reason we come to July 12th and don't have a solution, then we'll start a conversation with Scott about whether we can limp along month to month until we get placement in place. So just know that that's something we're working to address. I think that pretty well covers anything in the executive report that I need to address. Town council comments?
Kind of got just 2, maybe 3 short things to bring up. One is going back to what I discussed earlier. And it has to do with why I went to the extreme that I did at first and initially asking for a trial. And that is so that we could come to a happy medium. Instead of saying, I mean, it's either we got 2 extremes here, let's go all the way or let's do absolutely nothing. That was the main reason. So we could come to a happy medium and come to an agreement that let's get this documentation, let us review it first, and then we can go on to, if needed, a full-on investigation. The only reason why I came out with the information that I did today was because it was honestly, I do believe that there's a very good chance that nothing wrong had happened. And I wanted, but the public still needed to know that it happened. Great thing about this country is we're trying to pride ourselves on being transparent, things like that. I really wish that I probably should have said something a month and a half ago when it first came to my attention. But the fact of the matter is that the public needed to know that something happened with their money that seemed a little cattywampus there. I'm done with that until we review that until we review that information that we got there. The other thing, I've had several people come to me with concerns about the town logo getting changed to having the rainbow thing. I myself have no issue with our LGBTQ plus community. I love them, I embrace them. However, as a government, I don't really think that the government should take a stance on that. I am very glad that it's Pride Month. I like I said, I love each and every one of those guys, and some that I know Hamilton's having their contentious issue right now with the crosswalks. There's issues going on in Florence right now. I want to make a proposal here for Stevensville is why don't we make a sign that is in an area so that everybody of all different walks of life can contribute to. The sign can say Town of Stevensville on it, and then people can go up to it, put stickers on it, whatever they believe represents themselves as an individual to show the diversity of this town. I think that would be a happy medium there. And lastly, there's been a lot of questions as to why I am not going to be here in town for the last council meeting of June. I'm not angry at anybody for asking these questions. You guys do have a right, somewhat of a right to know as to why I'm not gonna be here. On February 19th of this year, I recently discovered that the man that I was raised to know was my father is not my biological dad. I'm going to meet my biological dad and his family in Baltimore, Maryland this year. It is the right thing to do. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do this. It felt so good to be able to go to bed one night and the biggest thing to me is my family got bigger, but to go to bed one night with every single one of my grandparents having been passed away, and then waking up the next morning to find out that I still have a grandmother is very important to me. And I'm so glad that I'm getting to go meet those people. I really wish I could be here for Western Heritage Days, but I'm actually getting to go be about 30 minutes away from our sister community of Stevensville, Maryland for about a week. So, and I'll try to keep each and every one of you guys updated with pictures and all that fun stuff on my Facebook page and everything. But other than that, that's actually, I guess I'll go on to a fourth thing. I'm gonna miss working right here beside this man right here. Mr. Sherd is an excellent servant for this community, and I am truly gonna miss working with him.
What prompted my resignation was rather urgent, and it wasn't a manner that I would like to leave the council. Like I said in my letter, family comes first, and they always will. I have a tremendous amount of respect for everybody at this table and the jobs you do. Jeff, Mac, appreciate all the work that you guys do. Bobby, Mr. Cruz, thank you for allowing me the opportunity, and down the road when things resolve in my family's life, I plan to come back. Thank you.
That would be all I would add to what Dempsey said. We're gonna miss you here. Appreciate your ability to be a servant for the town. Best of luck to you. We'll keep you in our prayers.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments to make, but first, I'm hoping to get some clarification. Farmers market is being charged an extra $10 for garbage. I believe that's, I don't know. I'll just get that wrong because I can't remember what I was told, but my understanding is that they have not in the past. They clean the street up prior to the event starting. They clean it up after each, and when I say the event, they pull the weeds at the beginning of the season. Clean the street up at the end of each Saturday. They clean up after themselves. They take garbage. In the past, they've always taken the garbage home themselves. I believe they're still doing that. Garbage is provided at each booth so that it's readily available. And this year it's something new. So can we get clarification on why that's happening?
Sure. So the council adopted a $10 per day garbage fee for special events in 2020. Excuse me, 2019. 2020 would have been the first season that we charged for it. When farmers market permit came forward in 2020, we waived that fee administratively for COVID-19 purposes because we wanted to encourage activity, and we knew there was an economic strain in the community. And so there was an approach to that, why that was waived. This year, we didn't take that approach. The reason that fee was instated was actually a request from the Public Works Department because in the summertime, we need to bring on an extra garbage can at the wastewater facility to handle all the garbage we receive in our auxiliary garbage cans that go up and down Main Street and in the parks and all those areas. Part of the rationale was to recover the cost of having that can there every month. While events typically, Creamery is a good example where they bring in dozens of their own garbage cans from litter disposal and typically handle their own trash. But there is a residual trash, excuse me. There is a residual trash use from that activity that burdens our trash receptacles. from those events. So with the activity on Saturdays from farmers market, if we dump on Friday, we usually have to dump first thing Monday morning, at least the can there at the corner. Because yes, they have, you know, their trash receptacles, but if you walk through the farmers market and you use the town's receptacle, it's caused by the event. So we always encourage the events to take care of their own trash. But the $10 a day fee is charged to all events. So the Creamery will pay that event, Western Heritage Days paid that event or that fee, because their event creates traffic and garbage outside of the garbage they dispose of themselves. And that was the rationale for instituting the fee, and that was the conversation that happened with the council at the time. So I think if council wants to reassess those fees, we do so when we discuss revenues, and we reevaluate the master fee schedule. The administration will propose some changes to the master fee schedule anyway, and especially in regards to public record requests, and some other fees that we charge, modifying those to make them more reasonable and usable. So, you know, if that's a conversation we want to have in the budget conversation, we can certainly do so.
Yeah, let's make that a topic of discussion, please.
Violet, in your mind, remember it.
Another thing, I'm kind of at just kind of, I don't know, a crossroads in my mind. A wonderful event happened this past weekend, and we're getting into our seasons of events where everybody in our community comes together. People from outside of our community come together, and everybody gets along. And there's no division, and there's no hatred, and there's no nasty grams on social media, and which I think is wonderful. Then we hear about how great our community is and how it's nice that we come together and, you know, we're one. And if that were true, we would be that way every day. We wouldn't have this crazed division. We wouldn't have this hatred that is so deep rooted in our community on both sides, whoever's representing whatever for whatever cause. And not only do I make my living off of bringing people together, I spend every moment of my personal time volunteering my time to bring people together and to bring our community together. Being on this council, I'm put in a position where I'm asked to choose a side, and I'm asked to choose hate, and I'm asked to choose division. Don't ask me to do that anymore. That's not my role here. It's not something I believe in. It's not something I will ever be a part of. I've lost friends because I've made that statement to them. I've lost people in the community that I look up to because I won't choose a side and I won't choose hate. It's wearing on me. And so publicly I'm saying, don't ask me to do that. That's not my job. But furthermore, that's not who I am, and that's not what I stand for. There's other ways of doing this, and it doesn't have to be hatred. It doesn't have to be spewing venom all over social media and walking down the streets and to your neighbors and to people you don't even know. So ask yourself, whatever you're doing, is it building our town up or is it tearing it apart? Ask yourself that. Lastly, I'm really going to miss you. You are so patient and so kind. You've brought such a peace to this place. I have high respect for you.
Thank you.
Take care of your family.
Board reports. Don't know if any boards have met since our meeting in May.
And the airport board was scheduled, and then there was a logistical mishap. So that was not able to, this airport board was not able to meet this week. But being the sole member of the Climate Change Advisory Board, we've had a great couple weeks.
All right, with that, that concludes the agenda of our meeting. I just ask that we adjourn tonight with a round of applause for Patrick for his service to our community. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.